The pod hit the ground so hard that my teeth cracked together inside my skull. My name is Threll Van, and I was a scout for the Caldrexy Dominion, the same Dominion that had walked across 400 worlds without losing a single war. I had seen deserts made of glass. I had seen cities kneel before our ships without a single shot fired. I had never once believed that a mission could go wrong, because in my entire service record, nothing ever had. The hatch of my drop pod hissed open, and warm, wet air rushed in. It smelled of wood, of water, of something green and alive. My scanner called this place a temperate biome, low threat, minimal technology, no orbital defense signature. Command had labeled Earth as a Class 3 primitive world. Their exact words were, "Expected surrender within hours." I remember laughing when I read that line. I am not laughing anymore. There were 4 of us on the ground team. Doran, our squad leader, a veteran of 3 conquests. Yisbel, our tech officer, sharp-tongued and always confident. Ren, the youngest of us, still eager to prove himself. And me, the one who was supposed to just take readings and stay quiet. We stepped out into darkness. Tall grass brushed against our legs, taller than any of us expected. The sky above was clear, filled with unfamiliar stars, and somewhere far off, a strange chorus of sounds rose and fell, calls I had never heard in any briefing file. Doran raised a hand for silence, but none of us were truly afraid. We had beam rifles capable of stopping heavy armor. We had personal shields that could take a direct hit from primitive firearms and not even flicker. What could a planet without space travel possibly throw at us? "Life signs everywhere," Yisbel said, tapping at her wrist display. "Small ones, medium ones, a few large ones further out. Nothing registers as a weapon signature." "Then it's nothing," Doran said. "Spread out, confirm atmosphere, confirm no resistance forces, and we go home before sunrise." I almost believed him. We moved through the grass in a loose line, scanners glowing soft blue in the dark. The ground here was soft, sometimes wet, and every few steps, something rustled just out of sight and then went still again. I told myself it was wind. I told myself it was small animals, harmless, the kind of thing our files described as insignificant fauna. I did not know yet that insignificant was the wrong word entirely. It was Ren who saw the eyes first. 2 points of pale light, low to the ground, maybe 30 paces away, catching the glow of our scanners. He froze and lifted his rifle, more out of habit than real concern. "Doran, I have a visual. Something is watching us." Doran turned his scanner toward it. "Body heat reading is high. Mass is moderate. It's alone. Hold position. Do not engage unless it approaches." For a moment, nothing happened. The grass did not move. The eyes did not blink. And then, without any warning sound, without any signal our sensors could translate into threat, the eyes vanished. "Where did it go?" Ren asked, his voice tighter now. Nobody answered him, because none of us knew. Yisbel's display buzzed. "I'm reading movement to our flank. Fast. Very fast. Faster than the readings should allow for something that size." Doran told us to form a defensive circle, and we did, backs together, rifles out toward the dark grass in every direction. My hands were steady, because I still believed our shields would protect us. I still believed that whatever primitive creature lived on this dirt world could not possibly hurt something wearing Caldrexy battle gear. Then something came out of the grass low and fast, and it did not come for me. It came for Ren. I only saw pieces of it, powerful shoulders, a coat the color of dry grass and shadow, eyes that did not carry fear, only calculation, the same calculation I had seen in seasoned soldiers before a strike. Ren's shield flared bright gold as the creature struck him, and for one heartbeat, I believed the shield had done its job, because that is what shields were built for. Then Ren's shield failed anyway, because it was built to absorb energy, and this thing carried none, only muscle, only weight, only intent that our systems had never been designed to measure. Ren's scream cut off far too quickly. Doran opened fire into the grass, and Yisbel grabbed my arm and pulled me backward, shouting something I could not process. because all I could hear was my own pulse hammering in my ears. Beam fire lit up the night in flashes of white and orange, and for a moment I thought we had won, that the creature was gone, that Ren would stand up laughing at how frightened we had all been. He did not stand up. Doran called for immediate extraction, his voice cracking in a way I had never heard from him before. Yisbel was already running, dragging me with her, and I remember looking back only once, seeing the grass swaying where Ren had been, and seeing nothing else. No enemy soldier, no hostile combatant, just tall grass moving gently, as if nothing unusual had happened at all. We reached higher ground near a cluster of large rocks, and Doran ordered us to hold there while he tried to raise the ship. His voice was clipped and fast. "This is Ground Team Alpha. We have lost one operative, requesting immediate orbital support and extraction. Repeat, we have encountered unknown biological hostiles." There was a long pause before the response came back. "Ground Team Alpha, please confirm. Unknown biological hostiles. Please clarify threat classification." Doran's jaw tightened. "There is no classification. It came out of nowhere. Our shields did nothing. It was fast, and it was strong, and it knew exactly what it was doing." Another pause, longer this time. I could almost picture the officers on the ship exchanging doubtful glances, the same doubt I had felt only minutes earlier. "Understood. Ground Team Alpha. Advise you regroup and continue primary objective. Extraction will take time to arrange." Yisbel let out a bitter laugh beside me, low and shaking. "They think we panicked. They think we imagined it." I wanted to believe they were right. I wanted, more than anything, to believe that what had happened to Ren was some strange accident, some unfortunate mistake that would never happen again. But then I heard it, a low sound rolling across the grass, deep and steady, almost patient, like something announcing that it was still there, still watching, still unbothered by our weapons, or our shields, or our 400 conquered worlds. Doran raised his rifle again, sweeping it slowly across the darkness. We moved to the rendezvous point. Nobody breaks formation. Nobody stops for anything. We began walking, slow and careful, every one of us scanning shadows that seemed to shift and breathe on their own. I remember thinking foolishly that surely the worst was over. Surely we had already met the single greatest danger this backward little world had to offer, and now it was simply a matter of surviving until sunrise. I was wrong about that too. Something screeched overhead, sudden and sharp, and Yisbel flinched hard enough to nearly drop her rifle. A shape passed low against the stars, wings wide and silent, gone again before any of us could track it properly on our scanners. My display flooded with readings that made no sense, dozens of heat signatures moving through the grass around us, above us, beneath the surface of a nearby pool of water where something long and patient waited without moving at all. "This world isn't undefended," Yisbel whispered. "It's just full." Doran did not answer her, but I saw something change in his face, something that had not been there before we landed. It was the same thing I felt twisting in my own chest. Not fear of an enemy soldier, not fear of a weapon we understood, but fear of a place that did not know we were invaders at all, a place that simply treated us the way it treated everything else that walked through its grass at night. We reached the rendezvous point as the first hint of gray light touched the horizon, and only then did the shuttle finally descend to collect us. Doran reported the incident in full to the ship's officers, his voice steady even though his hands were not. I said nothing, because I did not yet have words for what I had seen. I only remember staring out the shuttle window as we lifted away from the grass, watching the dark shapes of trees pass beneath us, and wondering how many more of those shapes were still down there, waiting, patient, and utterly indifferent to everything we believed about our own strength. That night, for the first time since I had joined the Dominion, I understood that we had made a terrible mistake in choosing this world, not because Earth had an army waiting for us, not because its people had weapons greater than our own, but because we had walked into a world that did not need an army to be dangerous, a world where every shadow could hold something ancient and capable, long before any human ever raised a hand against us. I did not sleep that night. None of us did. By the time the sun rose over the ship's control deck, the story of what happened to Ren had already spread through every level of the crew, and I could see the doubt on every face that looked my way. The senior officers gathered Doran, Yisbel, and me into a briefing room high above the command deck, its walls lined with screens showing slow, calm images of the blue and green world below us. From up here, Earth looked peaceful, harmless. Nothing like the place that had taken one of our own without giving us a single clear shot at what did it. Commander Isvara Kell led the meeting, a tall officer with a reputation for being difficult to impress. She listened to Doran's report without interrupting, her expression unreadable, and when he finished, she folded her arms and looked at each of us in turn. "You are telling me," she said slowly, "that a ground team equipped with standard Dominion gear was overwhelmed by a wild animal." "Not overwhelmed," Doran said firmly. "Ambushed. It moved faster than our sensors could track, and our shields failed to stop it because the shields were never designed to stop raw physical force at that speed." "An animal," Kell repeated, "on a world with no orbital defense, no space travel, no significant weapons technology." Yisbel leaned forward. "Commander, with respect, our scanners logged dozens of large biological signatures in that single stretch of grassland alone. This is not one dangerous creature. This is an entire ecosystem we know nothing about." Kell studied the three of us for a long moment, and I could see the calculation behind her eyes, the same kind of calculation I had seen in the creature that took Ren. She did not want to believe us, because believing us meant admitting that a Class 3 world had cost the Dominion a life without a single act of conscious resistance from its people. "I will not delay the invasion timeline because of one unfortunate incident," she said finally. "We will send a larger ground contingent, properly equipped, to secure the region and continue the primary objective. You three will remain aboard for now." I wanted to feel relief at those words, but instead I felt a cold weight settle into my chest, because I understood exactly what was about to happen to that larger team, and nobody on this ship was ready to hear it. The new ground force numbered 12 soldiers, led by an officer named Tavrik Austin, a broad-shouldered veteran known throughout the fleet for his calm under pressure. I watched the deployment from the observation deck alongside Isbel, both of us silent as the drop pods launched one after another toward the same stretch of grassland where Ren had disappeared. "They should have listened," Isbel murmured. "They will," I said, "once it happens to them too." The drone feeds came online a few minutes after the team landed, small floating cameras providing a live view back to the ship. At first, everything looked calm. The soldiers moved in formation through the tall grass, their scanners sweeping in slow, careful arcs, their weapons ready. Austin's voice came through steady and confident over the comm channel, reporting nothing unusual, no threats detected, environment appears stable. Then the insects came. It began as a low hum in the recordings, barely noticeable, the kind of background noise nobody thinks to question. Within minutes, that hum grew into a thick, swirling cloud that rose from the grass and the trees, small winged creatures by the thousands, moving with a kind of coordinated purpose that made my skin crawl, even watching from orbit. The soldiers' filtration systems, designed to keep out dust and toxic gas, were never built to handle a living swarm determined to find every gap in their armor. I watched Austin's team scatter, waving uselessly at the air around them, their scanners lighting up with warnings about compromised seals and rising internal temperatures inside their suits. One soldier tore off part of his helmet in frustration, gasping for cleaner air, and within moments his skin had reddened and swollen in a way that made even the ship's medical staff behind me go quiet. "Get them out," Yisbel whispered, though nobody could hear her from up here. Austin tried to hold formation, calling orders through the chaos, but the swarm did not relent, and neither did whatever else was hidden in the grass around them. On the drone feed, I saw shapes moving low and fast between the stalks, massive gray forms that our scanners identified only as large plant-eating mammals, harmless by every definition in our files. One of them, easily 3 times the height of a Caldrexi soldier, simply walked directly into the middle of the formation, unbothered by warning shots fired into the ground near its feet, and pushed through the line as though the soldiers were nothing more than tall grass themselves. 2 men went down beneath its weight, not from any intention of harm on the creature's part, but simply because it did not recognize them as anything worth avoiding. The rest of the team scattered further, breaking every rule of formation they had ever trained under, because nothing in their training had prepared them for an enemy that did not know it was fighting a war at all. Commander Kell arrived on the observation deck partway through the recording, her calm expression slipping for the first time since I had met her. She watched in silence as more warnings flashed across the drone feed, soldiers reporting fever, difficulty breathing, strange rashes spreading across exposed skin from insect bites their medical scanners could not properly identify. Whatever these small creatures carried inside them, it was nothing our physicians had ever prepared for, because nothing about this world matched anything we had studied before arriving. "Pull them back," Kell finally ordered, her voice tight. "Immediate extraction, all units." But extraction was not so simple this time. The shuttle sent to retrieve them struggled to find a clear landing zone through the swirling insects, and by the time it finally touched down in a nearby clearing, only 7 of the 12 soldiers who had landed that morning were able to walk aboard under their own strength. Austin was not one of them. His last transmission, broken and weak, described losing consciousness from what he believed was some kind of poison, delivered through repeated bites, his voice fading into static before the drone lost his signal entirely in the tall grass. I stood beside Yisbel on that observation deck, watching soldiers stumble off the shuttle back on the ship's landing bay, their armor scorched not by weapons fire, but by acidic secretions from insects, defending their nests, their exposed skin blistered and raw. The medical bay filled quickly, doctors working with equipment never designed to treat wounds like these, because nothing in the Dominion's long history of conquest had prepared them for a world where the greatest threats carried no weapons at all. Commander Kell called another briefing that evening, her earlier confidence replaced by something closer to genuine concern. This time the room was fuller, senior officers from every department present, all of them watching the same drone footage on repeat, searching for something they could understand, some clear enemy they could target with orbital strikes and be done with it. "There is no organized resistance," one officer said, staring at the footage. "No command structure to target, no weapons to disable. How do you fight an enemy that isn't even aware it's fighting you?" "You don't fight it," Yisbel said quietly, and every head in the room turned toward her. "You avoid it. This world is not defended by soldiers. It is defended by simply existing exactly as it always has, indifferent to anything that walks into it uninvited." Kell rubbed her temples, clearly exhausted. The Dominion does not retreat from Class 3 worlds. We have never retreated from a Class 3 world. "With respect, Commander," Yisbel said, "we have never encountered a Class 3 world like this one before." Nobody in that room had an answer to that, and for the first time since arriving in orbit around Earth, I saw genuine doubt spreading among officers who had conquered dozens of worlds without hesitation. It was not doubt about their weapons, or their ships, or their strategies. It was doubt about whether this particular world could even be understood well enough to conquer at all. Later that night, alone in my quarters, I reviewed the drone footage again on my own display, slowing it down frame by frame, searching for some pattern, some weakness we could exploit. What I found instead was something far more unsettling. In every clip, every moment of chaos, the creatures involved showed no sign of coordinated attack, no shared purpose beyond their own immediate survival, or simple indifference to our presence. The insects were not soldiers defending territory against invaders. They were insects, doing exactly what insects had always done, completely unaware that anything unusual was happening at all. That, I realized, was the truest danger of this world. Not that it fought back with intention, but that it did not need intention to cause us harm. We had arrived expecting an enemy who understood the concept of invasion, an enemy who might eventually surrender once shown sufficient force. Instead, we had found a world utterly unconcerned with our arrival, one that would continue exactly as it always had, whether we succeeded or failed, whether we lived or did not. I closed the display and sat quietly in the dim light of my quarters, listening to the low hum of the ship's systems around me. And for the first time since joining the Dominion, I found myself wondering whether some worlds were simply never meant to be conquered at all. 3 days passed before Commander Kell called the next full council, and in that time, the mood aboard the ship had shifted from confidence to something closer to quiet dread. Nobody spoke openly about it, but I noticed how the soldiers in the corridors walked a little slower now, how conversations dropped whenever the word Earth came up. Still, the Dominion had never abandoned a campaign, and pride is a heavy thing to set down once you have carried it across 400 conquered worlds. Kell decided the failure was not the plan itself, but the location. The grassland had been unpredictable, dense with hidden threats her officers could not properly map. This time, she chose a different target, a wide river system further south, calm and open, easy to observe from orbit, with none of the tall grass that had hidden so much danger before. Her reasoning made sense on paper. Open water, clear banks, nowhere for anything to hide. I was assigned to monitor the operation from the ship's tactical center this time, seated beside Isabel in front of a wall of screens showing live drone footage from multiple angles. The new team was larger still, 18 soldiers under the command of an officer named Calder Brine, equipped with heavier armor plating and stronger shield generators built specifically to withstand the kind of raw physical impact that had failed us before. "They learned from Austin's team," Yisbel murmured, as we watched the soldiers wade carefully along the riverbank. "Better plating, better shields." "It won't matter," I said quietly. "This world does not care how strong our armor is." Brine's team moved with far more caution than the previous groups, scanning every ripple in the water, every shift in the reeds along the bank. For nearly 20 minutes, nothing happened at all, and I began to wonder if perhaps this location truly had been safer, if perhaps our earlier failures had simply been bad luck rather than a pattern. Then the water near the center of the group began to churn. At first it looked like nothing more than a strong current, and Brine ordered his team to hold position and observe rather than retreat. That decision, made with reasonable caution by any standard we understood, proved to be the wrong one. What rose from beneath the surface was enormous, wider than 3 soldiers standing shoulder to shoulder, its skin thick and gray, its mouth opening in a display that our scanners had classified only minutes earlier as a harmless semi-aquatic herbivore. The creature did not attack with any apparent strategy. It simply moved through the water toward the nearest soldiers standing at the river's edge, driven by some instinct our files had never properly recorded, territorial and immense and utterly unconcerned with the weapons pointed at it. Beam fire lit up the water in flashes of light, and for a moment it seemed to falter, but its sheer size carried it forward regardless, scattering soldiers along the bank like leaves caught in a sudden wind. "That thing shouldn't be that fast," Yisbel said, gripping the edge of her console. "Our files listed it as slow-moving, low threat." "Our files are wrong about everything on this world," I said. Brine's voice came through the comm channel, strained but controlled, ordering half his team back from the water while the rest maintained defensive fire. It might have worked had the river held only one such creature, but as the drone camera panned wider, I saw more shapes rising from the shallows further down the bank, drawn perhaps by the noise and disturbance, each one just as massive, just as indifferent to the chaos it was creating simply by existing in its own territory. I watched 2 soldiers go down in the shallow water, not through any deliberate act of aggression from the creatures around them, but simply from being caught beneath something far heavier than themselves that did not register their presence as anything unusual. Their emergency beacons activated automatically, small red lights blinking uselessly on the drone feed, and I found myself unable to look away, even though every part of me wanted to. Brine ordered a full retreat, and this time his team obeyed instantly. No hesitation, no attempt to hold formation for the sake of pride. They scrambled up the riverbank toward higher, drier ground, weapons still raised behind them, watching the water with the kind of wariness I had never before seen in a Dominion soldier's posture. It was the posture of prey, not predator, and I understood in that moment how deeply this world had already changed the way our people thought about themselves. But the river was not finished with them yet. As the team reached what they believed was safe ground, a new wave of small flying insects rose from the reeds around them, carrying with it an invisible danger far more patient than any single creature could be. Within hours, reports came back from the medical staff describing fevers spreading rapidly among the soldiers who had spent even a few minutes near the water's edge, their bodies reacting violently to microscopic organisms that our scanners had never been designed to detect, let alone treat. By the time the surviving members of Brian's team returned to the ship, only 11 of the original 18 were able to walk unassisted, and even among those 11, several were already showing early signs of the same fever that had taken hold of the others. The ship's chief physician, an older Caldrexy named Orvin Tashe, delivered his report to Commander Kell with visible frustration in his voice. "We are treating symptoms we cannot properly identify," he said. "Every attempt to synthesize a countermeasure requires time we may not have. This world's biology does not follow any pattern our medical databases recognize." Kell listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable as always, though I noticed her hands were clasped tightly enough that her knuckles had paled. When Tosh finished, she turned to the wider council gathered in the room, officers from tactical, medical, and command, all present together for the first time since the invasion began. "We have lost more soldiers to this world's wildlife than we lost in our last 3 actual military campaigns combined," she said finally, her voice quiet but carrying clearly through the silent room. "And we have not yet encountered a single human soldier." That statement settled over the room like a physical weight. I saw officers exchange glances, saw the same doubt I had carried since Ren's disappearance now spreading openly among people who had spent their entire careers believing conquest was simply a matter of superior technology and overwhelming force. "Perhaps," one younger officer said carefully, "the humans themselves are not our true obstacle here at all." Nobody laughed at the suggestion, though a few weeks earlier they certainly would have. Isabel caught my eye from across the room, and I understood immediately that she was thinking exactly what I was thinking. We had assumed Earth's greatest defense would come from its people, from their weapons, their armies, their technology. Instead, every failure so far had come from something far older than any human city, something that had existed on this world long before humans ever built their first shelter against it. Kell dismissed the council shortly after, ordering a full halt to ground operations while medical and tactical teams reassessed their approach. As the room emptied, I remained behind for a moment, staring at the drone footage still frozen on the main screen, showing the river exactly as it had looked before Brian's team ever arrived, calm and undisturbed, as though nothing unusual had happened there at all. That was the detail that unsettled me most. The river did not look different after the encounter. It did not look victorious, or dangerous, or proud of what it had done. It simply looked like a river, exactly as it always had, utterly unaware that it had just cost the Dominion another dozen soldiers within a single afternoon. Walking back to my quarters that night, I passed by the medical bay and saw Tashi's staff working urgently over several beds, faces tight with concentration, monitors beeping in irregular rhythms I did not want to understand too closely. I did not stop to watch. I had already seen enough for one lifetime, and something told me the worst had not yet arrived. I was right about that too. After the council meeting, Commander Kell assigned me to a new duty, one I had not expected. Because I had survived the very first encounter on the ground, she believed I might notice patterns others would miss, so she placed me in the communications division alongside a small team responsible for intercepting human signals from the surface. It was quiet work compared to what I had already experienced, but it would soon prove far more unsettling than anything I had witnessed in the field. Human communication networks were surprisingly easy to access, far less guarded than anything we had encountered on other worlds preparing for invasion. Within a day, our translation systems had adapted enough of their language for us to follow news broadcasts, military channels, and even casual conversations shared across their public networks. What we found there changed everything I believed about this campaign. Humans knew we were here. They had known almost from the beginning, tracking our ships with instruments far more advanced than our files had suggested, and yet their reaction bore no resemblance to the panic or desperate resistance we had expected from a Class 3 world facing invasion. Instead, I found recordings of ordinary people discussing us with something close to amusement, sharing footage of our failed ground operations across their networks as though watching an entertaining spectacle rather than a genuine threat to their survival. I remember the first broadcast I translated in full, a woman named Grace Ellery reporting for a human news channel, standing in front of a screen showing blurry drone footage of Brian's team scattering along the riverbank. Her tone was calm, almost lighthearted, as she described the incident to her audience. Officials continue to advise caution near wildlife reserves, following unconfirmed reports of, quote, alien visitors encountering local hippopotamus populations, she said, and I heard something in her voice that took me a long moment to identify. It was laughter, carefully restrained but present all the same. Wildlife experts remind viewers that hippos are already considered among the most dangerous animals on the continent, alien or otherwise. I sat back from my console, stunned. This was not the reaction of a species bracing for annihilation. This was the reaction of a people who had lived alongside genuine danger for so long that an alien invasion barely registered as anything unusual by comparison. I brought my findings to Yisbel immediately, and together we spent the following days combing through human historical records, trying to understand what kind of species could greet an interstellar invasion with such calm. What we discovered only deepened my unease. Humans had spent thousands of years locked in constant struggle against their own planet's dangers, long before any of them ever dreamed of reaching the stars. They had built walls not against each other alone, but against creatures that had hunted their ancestors since before recorded history began. They had drained swamps, cleared forests, fenced off entire regions specifically to separate their cities from a natural world that had never once stopped being dangerous. They built their entire civilization around surviving this planet, Yisbel said quietly, reading through translated historical texts late one night in the communications bay. Every city we've scanned sits behind barriers designed to keep wildlife out. Every rural settlement maintains active defenses against predators. This isn't a species that fears danger, Threll. This is a species that has never known anything else. I thought of Wren, of Ossen, of the soldiers lost along that quiet river, and I understood with growing dread that everything the Dominion had suffered so far had come not from Earth's greatest defenders, but from creatures humans themselves had learned to manage centuries ago, sometimes as pests, sometimes as mere inconveniences to be fenced away from their homes. We had not yet encountered a single human soldier, and already we had lost more personnel than in any campaign in Dominion history. Commander Kell called for a full strategic review once our findings reached her, and this time the tension in the room was different from anything before. Officers argued openly, some demanding an immediate and overwhelming orbital strike to eliminate the wildlife threat entirely before continuing the invasion, others insisting this would violate the very conquest doctrine the Dominion had followed for centuries, doctrine that valued capturing worlds intact rather than reducing them to ash. We came here to add a world to the Dominion, one senior officer argued, his voice rising with frustration. Not to destroy it before we even meet its people properly. And what happens, another officer shot back, when we finally do meet its people, and they greet us with the same calm indifference they've shown toward every failure we've already suffered? What happens when we learn their actual defenses are worse than anything we've faced so far? I found myself speaking before I had fully decided to, my voice carrying further than I expected in the crowded room. Perhaps that is exactly the message they are sending us, without ever raising a single weapon of their own. Every head turned toward me, and I felt Yisbel's hand briefly touch my arm in quiet support as I continued. We have interpreted their calm as weakness, or as ignorance of the danger we represent, I said, but their historical records suggest otherwise. Humans have survived on this world by learning to live alongside constant danger, danger they cannot always control, danger that has killed their own people throughout their entire history. Their calm is not ignorance, Commander, it is experience. They are not afraid of us because their world has already taught them what real danger looks like, long before we ever arrived. Kel studied me for a long moment, her expression unreadable as always, though I noticed something shift behind her eyes, some quiet recognition of a truth she had perhaps already begun to suspect herself. You are suggesting we withdraw entirely. I am suggesting, I said carefully, that we consider what kind of species emerges from a world that treats us as an inconvenience rather than a threat. If their wildlife alone has cost us this much, what do their actual defenses look like? What happens when they decide we are worth a genuine response rather than simple observation from a comfortable distance? The room fell silent at that, and I could see the weight of the question settling over every officer present. Some looked away, unwilling to consider an answer they clearly feared. Others exchanged glances that suggested they had already begun quietly reaching the same conclusion I had. An officer from Tactical Command finally broke the silence, his voice quieter now, stripped of its earlier confidence. Orbital strike remains the safest option. Remove the wildlife threat entirely, level the region, and proceed with ground operations without further risk. And what message does that send? I said, to a species already watching our every failure with amusement rather than fear. What happens when they see us respond to a river creature and an insect swarm with a weapon capable of destroying an entire region? Do we truly believe that will make them respect us, or will it simply confirm that we came here already afraid of what their world could do to us, without their people lifting a single hand? Nobody answered me directly, but I saw the argument take hold across the room regardless, spreading slowly from officer to officer as they considered the implications more carefully. Kel finally raised a hand for silence, ending the debate for the moment. We will hold current operations, she said. No further ground deployments until we better understand what we are truly facing, and no orbital action without my direct authorization. She paused, looking toward the wide viewport showing Earth turning slowly beneath us, blue and green, and utterly calm despite everything we had already thrown against it. I want a full report on human military capability within 3 days. If their wildlife alone has cost us this dearly, I want to know exactly what awaits us if their people ever decide to respond in kind. The council dispersed slowly after that, officers speaking in hushed voices as they filed out, none of them carrying the same easy confidence they had walked in with weeks earlier. I remained behind with Isabel, both of us staring silently at the planet below, its surface hiding countless dangers we had only begun to understand, its people watching our every failure with a calm that felt, more than anything else, like a quiet and patient warning. You really believe they're that dangerous? Isabel said eventually. The humans themselves, I mean. Not just their wildlife. I thought of Grace Ellery's calm voice, of the laughter she had barely restrained while reporting our failures to her audience, of a species that had spent its entire history surviving dangers we had only just begun to comprehend after losing dozens of soldiers to creatures their own children were taught to recognize by name before they could properly walk. I believe, I said slowly, that we have made a terrible mistake in assuming their wildlife was the greatest danger this world had to offer us, and I believe we are about to learn exactly how wrong that assumption truly was. Neither of us spoke again for a long while, watching the quiet blue world turn beneath our ship, patient and unbothered, waiting for whatever we decided to do next. 3 days after that council meeting, Commander Kell called me to her private office, and I knew before she spoke that whatever she was about to ask of me would not be easy. She stood facing the wide viewport, hands clasped behind her back, watching Earth turn slowly below us, with an expression I had never seen on her before, something closer to weariness than the sharp confidence she had always carried. We lost contact with a recovery drone near the river site 2 days ago, she said without turning around. Before the signal failed, it recorded data we need, tactical readings, biological samples, and most importantly, the recorder unit from Brian's own equipment. If we are ever going to understand what killed our people out there, we need that data intact. You want me to retrieve it, I said, though it was not truly a question. You are the only surviving member of our very first ground encounter, she said, finally turning to face me. You understand caution in a way none of our newer soldiers have learned yet. I am sending a small team, minimal footprint, no engagement, unless absolutely necessary. Locate the recorder, retrieve it, and return. Nothing more. I did not argue, though every part of me remembered the sound of Ren's scream cutting off too quickly in the dark. Yisbel volunteered to accompany me without hesitation, and Kel assigned 2 additional soldiers, quieter and more cautious than the previous teams, chosen specifically for their restraint rather than their aggression. We landed near dawn, the sky above the river painted in soft shades of orange and gray, and for a moment, standing on that quiet bank, it was almost possible to forget everything that had happened here only days before. The water moved calm and slow, reeds swaying gently in a light breeze, birds calling from somewhere across the far bank. It looked, in that fragile early light, like the most peaceful place I had ever seen. Isbel's scanner located the recorder's signal quickly, buried partially in mud near where Brian's team had first encountered the creature in the water. We moved carefully along the bank, weapons lowered but ready, scanning every ripple and shadow with far more caution than any previous team had shown. I felt my pulse quicken with every step, memories of that first night in the grass rising unbidden, but nothing emerged from the water this time. The river remained calm, indifferent, exactly as it had been before we ever arrived to disturb it. We were perhaps 20 paces from the recorder when Isbel froze, raising a closed fist for silence. I followed her gaze toward the tree line at the edge of the clearing, and my breath caught in my chest. Humans, 6 of them, dressed in mottled green and brown fabric that blended almost seamlessly with the surrounding foliage, weapons raised but not yet firing, watching us with the same calm, careful patience I had come to associate with everything else on this world. They had clearly been observing us for some time before revealing themselves, and I understood immediately that we had walked directly into their presence without ever detecting them at all. One of them, a woman with steady eyes and short dark hair, stepped forward slightly ahead of the others, her weapon lowered just enough to signal she was not yet ready for conflict. She spoke, and though I could not understand her words directly, our translation implants processed them a moment later, delivering her meaning clearly into my mind. "You are a long way from your ship," she said, her tone measured, neither hostile nor welcoming. Yisbel and I exchanged a glance, and slowly, carefully, I lowered my own weapon, gesturing for the rest of my team to do the same. Whatever advantage we might have held in a sudden exchange of fire, I understood instinctively that these were not soldiers who had stumbled upon us by chance. They had allowed us to walk this close deliberately, and that realization alone told me more about human capability than any orbital scan ever could. "We are here to retrieve equipment," I said slowly, hoping our translators carried the words back to her clearly. "Nothing more. We do not intend harm to your people." The woman studied me for a long moment, her expression unreadable in a way that reminded me uncomfortably of Commander Kell. "Your people have already caused harm," she said finally, "not to us directly, but we've watched the reports. 12 soldiers near the grassland, 18 more here at this river. None of them fired on us. None of them ever even saw a human face before they went down." I said nothing, because there was nothing I could say that would soften the truth in her words. "My name is Claire Doyle," she said after a moment, lowering her weapon fully now, though the soldiers behind her remained alert. "I command this unit. We were sent to monitor activity near this site after the incident, in case any of your people returned." She paused, glancing briefly toward the water. "I imagine you've noticed by now that this world doesn't need our help to be dangerous." "We have noticed," I admitted quietly. Claire's expression shifted slightly, something almost like sympathy passing across her features, though her posture never fully relaxed. "For what it's worth, none of what happened to your people was personal. That river doesn't know what an invasion is. Neither do the insects or the animals in that grassland. They were simply doing what they've always done, long before your ships ever arrived in our sky. Then why, I asked, unable to hold the question back any longer, do your people seem so calm about all of this? We expected fear. We expected desperate resistance. Instead, we found amusement and quiet observation, as though our presence barely mattered to you at all. Claire was quiet for a long moment, considering her answer carefully. Because we've spent our entire history surviving things far more patient and far more dangerous than your ships, she said finally. Storms that flatten cities, diseases that spread faster than any army, creatures that have hunted our ancestors since long before we built our first shelter against them. You arrived expecting a battle. What you found instead was a world that simply continues, the same as it always has, regardless of who or what tries to claim it. I thought of Ren, of Ossen, of the soldiers lost along this very riverbank, and I understood, with a clarity that settled cold and heavy in my chest, exactly what she meant. We had come here believing conquest was a matter of overwhelming force, of superior weapons, and unshakable confidence. Instead, we had discovered a world that did not require an army to defend itself, because the world itself had never stopped being dangerous, long before any human decided to raise a hand against us at all. And your people? I asked quietly. If we had never encountered your wildlife at all, if we had walked straight into your cities instead, what would we have found there? Claire's expression did not change, but something in her eyes did, something quiet and unwavering that told me more clearly than any words could have. I suppose that depends on what you intended to do once you arrived, she said. We've survived far worse than storms and diseases, Threlvan. We've survived each other for longer than your dominion has likely existed at all. I would not recommend finding out what that means firsthand. I did not ask how she knew my name, though I suspected our communications had never been as secure as we believed. For a long moment, neither of us spoke, the quiet river continuing to flow beside us, as though the tension between our two peoples meant nothing to it at all. Finally, Claire gestured toward the mud where the recorder still lay half-buried near the water's edge. "Take what you came for," she said. "We won't stop you, but I'd advise your commanders to consider carefully what they intend to do next. This world has already shown you what happens to those who underestimate it without even trying. I would not want to see what happens when it decides to try." Yuzbel retrieved the recorder in silence, and our small team withdrew slowly from the clearing, watched the entire time by Claire and her soldiers, none of whom lowered their guard until we had returned safely to our shuttle. As we lifted away from the river, I looked back one final time, watching the small group of humans disappear beneath the tree line, calm and unhurried, exactly as they had been from the very first moment we encountered them. Back aboard the ship, I delivered my full report to Commander Kell personally, describing everything Claire Doyle had said, every quiet warning carried behind her measured words. Kell listened without interruption, her expression growing more distant with every detail I shared, until finally she turned once more to stare out at the planet below. "They allowed you to walk within their sight without detecting them," she said quietly. "They knew your name. They watched our failures with patience rather than fear." She paused for a long moment. "And you believe this was a warning?" "I believe," I said carefully, "that we have already lost more than we understand, without a single human ever raising a weapon against us. And I believe that if we continue this campaign, we will learn exactly what Claire Doyle meant when she said, 'This world has survived far worse than we could ever bring against it.'" Kell was silent for a long time after that, and when she finally spoke again, her voice carried none of the certainty I remembered from our very first meeting weeks earlier. "I will bring this to the full council," she said, "but I suspect, Threlvan, that you already know what decision I intend to recommend." I did know, though I did not say it aloud. In the days that followed, the Dominion's council debated long and carefully, weighing pride against caution, weighing the memory of 400 conquered worlds against the quiet, patient danger of a single world that had never once needed its people to lift a weapon in its own defense. In the end, The decision came slowly, reluctantly, but it came all the same. Our fleet withdrew from Earth's orbit without ever engaging its people directly, carrying with us nothing but the memory of soldiers lost to grass and water and wings, and the quiet, unshakable knowledge that some worlds are simply never meant to be conquered at all. I often think back to that morning by the river, to Claire Doyle's calm, measured voice, and to the strange, unsettling peace that settled over that clearing, despite everything that had already happened there. We had arrived, expecting to face humanity at its weakest, a species without space travel, without advanced weapons, without any obvious means of resisting our overwhelming force. Instead, we discovered a world that had spent its entire existence teaching its people patience, caution, and quiet resilience against dangers far older and far more persistent than anything the Dominion had ever prepared us to understand. We never did learn what truly waited for us in humanity's cities, in their armies, in whatever defenses they had built beyond the reach of our scanners. Perhaps that uncertainty was the greatest lesson this world ever taught us. Some invasions end not with a final battle, but with a quiet withdrawal, carried by the simple, humbling realization that we had never truly understood what we were facing at all, long before we ever encountered the people themselves. To this day, I do not know whether Earth's wildlife alone could have been called our true opponent, or whether it was simply the first quiet warning of something far greater, watching patiently from behind walls and fences built specifically to keep the rest of their dangerous world at bay. What I do know is this: we came to Earth believing conquest was a matter of strength and confidence alone. We left having learned that some worlds defend themselves simply by being exactly what they have always been: indifferent, patient, and utterly unwilling to yield, long before their people ever needed to raise a single hand at all.